Hi everybody. Welcome everybody for the session for the Ecosocialism Conference, First Nations Fight Back for Sovereignty. So we've got 4 wonderful speakers today. We've got Senator Lidia Thorpe. We've got Celeste Liddle. We've got Raelene Cooper. And we've got Dr. Arama Rata. And these are all fighters, warriors. So my name is Sue Bolton, and I'll be just emceeing this first session for the conference. And I would like to start by recognising we're meeting on the lands of the Murujuga Wurrung and also the Bunurong, different parts of the territory which was colonised in this area. The land was never ceded, it was taken by force. We pay respect to elders past, present and future. And also I'd like to pay my respects to all First Nations people here today. The struggle for First Nations sovereignty is deeply connected with the struggle against racism, imperialism and capitalism. And I would like to acknowledge that the pain that's felt by many First Nations people watching the genocide in Gaza and then thinking about what the genocide was like for First Nations people, for ancestors and also current survivors. As socialists, we pledge to actively fight for decolonisation and against all the manifestations of that which continue till today, such as children being stolen, deaths in custody, the poverty gap and all manifestations of colonisation that are still ongoing today. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Just a few little points of information as people work their way around this conference site before we start the speakers. Toilets are located on both this floor and also the ground floor of this centre. Green Left and Socialist Alliance are the hosts of this conference, and if you're inspired by the conference and want to get involved in socialist politics, you can either join us or stay in touch. There'll be a contact list circulating after the speakers are finished. And also we have an information stall about Socialist Alliance and Green Left in the foyer just here, just outside the door. So I'll read out the introductions to the speakers as they're about to speak. Our first speaker, and also just to let people know, speakers will be speaking between 15 minutes and 20 minutes. We hope to have time for question and discussion, but there is a chance we may not because we are starting slightly late. But hopefully there will be time for questions and discussion. Our first speaker is Senator Lidia Thorpe. She is a Gunnai, Gunditjmara and Djab Wurrung mother, grandmother, activist and politician. But she's an activist politician. She's not just a standard kind, not just a career politician. She's an independent senator for Victoria and was the first Aboriginal senator from Victoria. She was born in the Inner Melbourne's Housing Commission flats. These are flats we're trying to save at the moment, stopping the state government from demolishing them, which that's their plan. Lidia was raised to advocate for herself and those around her. She comes from a long line of resistors. After surviving domestic violence, Lidia raised 3 kids as a single mum and went on to university to study policy. This equipped her to advocate for women's rights, public health, environmental protection, public housing and child protection. Lidia is an active campaigner for social and environmental justice and she's a sought-after public speaker and commentator. In 2017, she was the first Aboriginal woman elected to the Victorian Parliament. Actually, it's quite amazing. As the Victorian Greens MP for Northcote, she held several portfolios, including Aboriginal Affairs, Mental Health, Consumer Affairs and Sport. In 2020, Lidia was chosen to replace Richard Di Natale in the Senate and was sworn in holding a message stick burned with 441 marks, one for each death in custody since the handing down of the findings of the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody in 1991, and holding up her fist in a gesture of spirit and solidarity. In 2023, she left the Greens to sit on the crossbench as an independent representing the Black Sovereign movement. So I'd welcome Lidia to come and speak to you.
Thank you. I must take that bio down from my website. It's a bit long and bit gammon with the... I'm embarrassed by it, actually. I'm just an activist. I'm a Gunnai, Gunditjmara and Djab Wurrung woman, and we're on stolen land. This is Wurundjeri, Wurrung, Kulin Nation, and you're all privileged to be here. And if you're not paying the rent, you probably should be. If you can't afford it, there's other ways to pay the rent. There's a little slideshow, but I just wanted to, I'm not speaking to it. It's about, I have a duty to my ancestors and to those that have come before me. So this is just paying homage and respect to those activists that we can never forget their legacy and their fight, because they died. Some of these fellas died fighting for my people, fighting for their land and their water. So there's no order. Just keep it running through, if that's all right. Maybe allow people to read their quotes. But it's people like Uncle Kevin Buzzacott and Uncle Robbie, of course, my grandmother Edna Brown, Uncle Bruce McGuinness. And I wouldn't be standing here today without the people behind me. I come from colonisers' headquarters last night, one of the most violent places in this country, where I'm surrounded by privilege, I'm surrounded by warmongers, and on Thursday I was told off for saying white supremacy and cookers, that we had cookers in the Senate, so they weren't really happy about that. But they can't prove otherwise, right? So somebody's, promoting hate, somebody's paying for the neo-Nazi movement in this country, and I believe that there are members within that Senate chamber that are complicit and that are supporting. Obviously, there were a number of those racists that attended those rallies. So, I'm not really prepared for this morning, but I'll just wing it and not go over time. We just saw what happened last week. That assault has been on my people since the day that we were invaded, and the genocide continues. It's just more sophisticated, and that's why, we stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters in Palestine, because we do know what it's like, and I'm living proof of surviving a ongoing onslaught of my people. On Gunditjmara land, we had over 70 clans. Now we have 7. So they almost annihilated us, and it's a testament to my old people. Funny that she's up there now, Nan Edna. that, you know, when the authorities came to Mum's door at the Carlton Flats, because I was a newborn going home to the Carlton high-rise, and the authorities knocked on the door, and because Mum was black and didn't have a job, they wanted to take me, and Nan Edna said, "You're not effing taking this kid," and fought for those authorities to leave. And so if it wasn't for strong matriarchs in my life, I could have had a different trajectory. But I continue to fight against, you know, the 24,000 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children that are still in out-of-home care today, and the ever-growing deaths in custody, as you know. I mean, you probably hear me saying this all the time, but it's been the same since I was born into this struggle. I don't know anything different. And when the Nans set up the health service in Gertrude Street, it was at the time that the Black Panther movement did come to Fitzroy and said they wanted to see black people in this country. And that just, you know, lit the fires in my matriarch's belly in the early or late 60s and early 70s. It's when Muhammad Ali came, and I sat on his knee. So I must have got a bit of power from that old fella too. Uncle Dennis, you know, one of my mentors as well growing up, particularly at the Tent Embassy in Canberra, always telling me what I should be saying, what I should be doing. And so I'm, you know, you can blame all these fellas behind me as to who I am and why I exist today. And I'll just continue that legacy, and I'll instill that in my children and my grandchildren. And this week I had Seed Mob come to Canberra, and I just, you know, when you feel so oppressed in that space and you get a mob of young people come in that are fighting for climate and for land and water, it just made me feel like, you know, okay, I'll keep going. They're not gonna kill me yet. And their feedback to me was, "Oh, all these other politicians, they're gammon, auntie. They're gammon. Like they just want to take a photo with us, and you just cancelled everything to be with us," which I did because I just could not deal with doing the motions, and they just passed the immigration bill, which was completely violent and violates so many people in this country. And it was like straight after the White Australia policy marches that we saw. So they are complicit, and Labor is a complete disappointment, and they were to these young people as well. I'm just not going to talk anymore because I think you know what I'm about. I want to hear from my sisters here, and I just want to finally say that we can't go into this deportation language that this petition is calling for. We know how much that hurts black and brown people in this country, and we can't send more neo-Nazis to our sisters' country. We saw what they've done there in Christchurch. So I'm not a supporter of that petition, and I hope that no one else is in this room, because we need to deal with neo-Nazis and the racism in this country, so that we eradicate racism altogether. So thank you very much, and good on you for turning out today.
Thanks, Lydia, and I'm sure people will want to ask questions and so forth. So there's that'll allow plenty of time for questions. Lydia will have lots to say in response to questions and so forth, and great to hear your opposition to this horrific deportation agenda of, well, both Liberal and Labor. So our next speaker is going to be Celeste Liddle. She's an Arrernte woman living in Melbourne. She's a union organiser, social commentator, freelance writer, an activist who in 2017 was inducted into the Victorian Women's Honour Roll, and she's always been very outspoken in a really fantastic way. Thanks, Celeste.
Good morning. My bio is a little out of date too now because I'm still an organiser, but I am a coordinator now. I've finally had a promotion after 14 and a half years of working in the union. Look, I'm just going to begin by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I'm an Arrernte woman. My traditional lands are in Bantua or Alice Springs, and then pretty much east and southeast of there. I'm Arrernte three ways, to put that bluntly, because I've got three lines of ancestry that are all Arrernte and they come from different lands across Arrernte country. So I cover a fair amount of the desert. Yeah, and I'm related to half of Central Australia, but I have been living here on the wonderful lands of the Wurundjeri people and sometimes the Bunurong people too, when I've done a brief stint over the other side of the Yarra. So I did want to acknowledge, as somebody whose non-Indigenous ancestors first came to these lands between 5 and 7 generations ago, that the people of the Kulin Nations have never ceded their sovereignty, that a treaty or proper sovereign agreement is yet to be negotiated for use on these lands, and therefore every single day I benefit from the displacement of those people and therefore join them in their continuing fight for justice and for the recognition of sovereignty on their own lands, which is long overdue. So, yeah. I put a stopwatch on myself. I said that I'm a little bit unprepared today, and the reason for that is that I had a migraine that knocked me on my ass on Wednesday. So I'm pretty much going to get up here, talk about myself and try and use that as examples of sovereignty movements, of how to build stuff, and where to next. And the first thing that I'd like to do is share a little bit of a story about the first rally that I remember going to. I'm sure it wasn't the first rally that my parents dragged me to, but it's the first one I remember. And that was in 1988, which people will remember was a pretty significant year. They all gave us a medal and did these dances on TV for those of us old enough to remember those poxy ads. But what that year was with the bicentenary was also a year of massive convergences of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people getting on the streets and marching for land rights. We're in the throes of the land rights movement and the activism around that, and 200 years gave us this amazing opportunity to reinforce that, you know, whose land was it? What were people celebrating? Why were people celebrating 2,000 years of colonisation, of massacres, of erasure, of strategic forgetfulness when it came to the actual history of this country? The knowledges that have gone into this country for millennia upon millennia, that's what people were celebrating that year. And I was a kid growing up in Canberra. I'd been given my little bicentennial medal by the school, as we all got. I think I busted it open and tried to have a look at it. It was really, who knows where that ended up. But I do remember one thing from that year, and that was also the year that the horrible coloniser house that Lydia has to hang around so much was open that year. So there was a massive convergence of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who went to that opening in May of 1988. And that was the rally that I was dragged to. And as kids, we didn't realise that we were being dragged to a rally. I don't think that Mum and Dad thought to tell us this part. But we do remember rocking up there. I was 10 at the time. And it was the biggest gathering of black people that I'd ever seen in my life. That was the first thing that we walked into. The second thing was that all of those black people were marching down the street as the official ceremonies for the opening of the coat hanger on the hill was going on, yelling, "Land rights now, bicentennial bullshit." So yeah, we were allowed to walk around the streets swearing, and as kids we thought that was fucking great. But to see that amount of black fellas just walking around Canberra, and Canberra at that time was actually a pretty big community town. I had been born there because like a lot of other members of the Perkins family, so my ancestry is Liddle, obviously, but also Perkins through my grandmother. My dad had ended up working in the public service in the Department of Aboriginal Affairs. He was Aboriginal Hostels Limited. He'd been assisted. He'd been grabbed by Uncle Charlie, like a lot of those kids were up there, and assisted in getting into a cadetship in the public service there. So at that time, there was this magnificent, vibrant community of Aboriginal people that would often get together, talk politics, rally around the tent embassy, which was still very much in its throes and fights when I was really little, and share that sort of knowledge, protest, you know, the amount of family gatherings I remember where someone would whip out a guitar and there'd be Charlie fucking Pride. Sorry, I'll try and stop swearing. You know, somebody would be singing Crystal Chandelier, but mainly what we'd see would be a bunch of Aboriginal people sitting around the table, our elders, talking about what they were going to do next. You know, the tent embassy was under threat again. We needed to get more people there, or gearing up for more protests to follow that convergence at the opening of Parliament House. And at the very same time as all of this was going on, Mum and Dad, one night, were just getting dinner together or something like that, and they had the news playing in the background, and the news was covering the Todd River damming project that was going on and the protest against that. And what had happened with that was they wanted to dam the Todd River and set up a lake reserve up there on Arrernte country. This was on, this damming project was going to be destroying women's sites. So a bunch of Arrernte women had gotten together, set up a protest camp and knuckled down. And the news was playing in the background, and next thing we hear over the news is, "You bloody dingo," which had been yelled at one of the politicians who was trying to talk up the project. And Mum turns to Dad and goes, "Was that your mother?" So yeah, my Nana Emily was at the protest camp yelling at politicians and calling them bloody dingoes. That women's camp, that protest against the dam project was ultimately successful. The Todd River was not dammed, so those sites remain. But yeah, that was a bit of my background. So growing up in Canberra, got staunch Arrernte women going off in the desert, got a pretty staunch community in Canberra rallying around the tent embassy and all other projects there. But just kind of taking the land rights fight for granted. Like, you know, this is where it was at its throes with the bark petitions and you know, the actual discussion about treaties. But the really sad thing about that is I was 10 then, I'm 47 now, we're still talking about treaties now. One of the things that I am going to whinge about was the recent referendum campaign and what that was kind of like, because there was, as somebody who very purposefully maintained an undecided position publicly on the referendum, a lot of people tried to frame that undecided position as Celeste is opposed to the referendum, she's fighting against the referendum, she's fighting against having an Aboriginal voice in Parliament. It was never anything of the sort. What I was actually fighting against by maintaining that position publicly, and you're never going to know which way I voted, so don't ask, but what I was fighting against was the fact that most of the discussion in the referendum campaign was not discussion that was being led by Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people. It was white people, and it was misinformation. White politicians performing their acceptance, their solidarity with Aboriginal people by saying, I'm supporting yes. The referendum itself, as they've commonly said, was lost because of the misinformation and the lying campaign, and that is completely true. But what I strongly argue is that the lies weren't actually all coming from the conservative no people. There was a lot of lying going on with the Yes campaign too. And as a unionist who was sitting in that space, what I mean by that is that a lot of people were out there talking about how this was a massive move for Indigenous rights in this country, that, you know, it'd make sure that we had a seat at the table, that we were heard. None of those things were actually ever on the table. What was on the table was a voice that had no legislative oversight. It had no power of veto. There was no guarantees of the structure of that voice, so we couldn't even guarantee that it'd be a voice that was democratically elected by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to speak on our rights. And it was also a proposal that the government may have had there but had no obligation to listen to, and indeed they retained the right to decide the structure of that voice at any given time. So the voice to Parliament, the proposal on the table, could have just been one person, say, you know, Warren Mundine, for example, if he was in the good graces of the government of the day, being a voice to Parliament. Or it could have been a selection of people. There was actually nothing in this proposal. And what was probably the most offensive part of me was that it was framed as this massive anti-racism, an addressing of the racism of the structures, when the Constitution itself that they were trying to write us into remains deeply racist. You know, there's still Section 25 that's retained in the Constitution that states that there is a right to ban groups of people by virtue of their race from voting in this country. There's still the race power that exists, the right to make laws relating to different races of people, and there's still Section 44, which people always overlook. But Section 44, to me, as somebody who has previously run for Parliament, I'm going to talk about that in a second, if I've got the time, which I haven't given myself. Section 44 essentially states no brown folks, no poors, no criminals, no public servants. The no brown people's part I'm talking about refers to the fact that there's still a ban on dual citizens from running in Parliament, and that ban came into effect. It was part of the argument behind that ban came in because they didn't want migrants from China, from India, and that they only wanted British subjects running for Parliament. So this was a ban. It still exists in the Parliament. Yes, it was hilarious when Barnaby Joyce fell afoul of it 10 years ago, but it is a remnant and it has no place in an increasingly global society. 5 minutes to go. There we go. I've got 1 minute 48, so I'm going to listen to you. Look, I will say, as somebody who did previously run for Parliament, what I did learn, and, you know, Lidia has been in there fighting for a damn long time, but one thing I did learn going through that process is that they don't actually really want Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in Parliament. As a candidate, and the main reason that I ran was because I strongly believe that I live in one of the least democratic seats in the country. The neighbouring seat, the seat of Cooper, used to be the seat that a seat that was held by Labor by about 30% until the Greens started chomping away at the bit. And it's a seat that's been taken for granted. So our voices, the voices of the residents in that community have never actually been at the table, because in our current parliament, it's a dynamic of power as opposed to representation. So because it was a safe seat, it was taken for granted, and I decided to run mainly to try and inject a little bit of democracy in that. But as a candidate, I was really set upon, significantly more than any other candidate across the country, with the exception of Lidia. The idea that an Aboriginal person would run against a nice Labor lady, particularly an Aboriginal person with a mouth on her, was just a bit too much for people to handle. And so the amount of abuse that I received just for daring to put my hand up was incredible. But yeah, we do need to enhance democracy. We do need more people to chomp at the bit. I don't actually really believe insanely in democracy. And I say that as somebody who is a direct descendant of democracy revolutionary Quintondaccia. I'm not seeing an awful lot of evidence that representation of the people does win out, which is what he stormed Utrecht Town Hall in order to put in place. A couple of sort of thoughts just to close off. As Sue said, I've been a writer for a long time, and I'm a really disillusioned writer, because I feel like I've been writing the exact same article for 15 years, or the exact same articles. And those same articles are things like Invasion Day and why it is we still protest. They're about closing the gap and why there's still a gap there. They're about, NAIDOC Week and why it is that we just want 1 week where people stop and, think about celebrating the communities. And if it's not, or it's incarceration and our exorbitant rates of incarceration as peoples. And if it's not all of those topics, which I've been writing on the same one, then it's because some knucklehead out there in the public eye has said something extraordinarily racist and they want an Aboriginal person to respond to it. This is tiring, and this comes about because Australia is yet to actually deal with its history. It's yet to deal with its story, and it's yet to actually broach an agenda of truth-telling. The country that I grew up in, this country that those knuckleheads last week was reckoning that they were protecting, is a country that has never existed. There's never been a cohesive Australia, and the reason why there's never been a cohesive Australia is because Australia itself was colonised on the land of terra nullius, land belonging to no one, and therefore the erasure of millennia of history, and then the greatest Australian silence that kicked in from that point onwards, denying the removal of kids, denying the massacres, denying the erasure of language and the genocide. So the way I see it is that first and foremost, if we're going to get anywhere in this country, then we need to engage on a full-blown truth-telling agenda. We need to actually sit there with the truth and feel uncomfortable and then negotiate as knowledgeable as I keep saying cohesive, that's not the word I'm looking for, but as knowledgeable people who do want to come together, how we come together and grapple with that history in order to make a positive future. And so that's where I'd urge people to go. Thank you, Sue. Yeah. Let's look at truth-telling and let's deal with that past and let's deal with the stuff that my ancestors were fighting for, back there where I remember, so that we're not still talking about treaties and that when my nephews and niece are 47 as well.
Thank you for that, Celeste. Our next speaker has come all the way from the West Coast. Raelene Cooper is a Mardudhunera woman, former chair of the Murujuga Aboriginal Corporation and founder of Save Our Songlines, an Aboriginal-led campaign coordinated by traditional custodians of Murujuga, the Burrup Peninsula in Western Australia's Pilbara region to protect their country. And she's been involved in many battles, and it's really great having a speaker from another part of the country, because I think that's really important for us to have these discussions and collaboration across the country about First Nations campaigns as well as other campaigns. So it's a real privilege to welcome Raelene. Thank you. I forgot to say she's a very strong fighter.
Okay, Waiba Wandiwa everyone, good morning and hello. I'll just let you know I get a little bit nervous to start with, so I talk really fast. I think I said this the last time I was at one of these events. Look, first of all, I'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to the Wurrung people in the Kulin Nation. Look, this place is an amazing place. It's really green compared to home, certainly. But in saying that, you know, everything's changing. We know it's changing a lot. Critical times right now for, you know, the disruption of weather patterns, our land, our water, everything. Well, look, let's get into it. Bear with me, everyone. And look, lovely to meet these ladies at the panel here. Sister, thank you for having us here on your country as well. But amazing what you were just speaking about. So thank you so much for sharing. For me, it was a little bit of a mishap last night as well, but my team and I were up till, you know, after midnight, and I haven't had any sleep because you know what it's like when you're travelling a lot, lots on your mind and whatnot, and certainly lots on my mind to keep busting and fighting the government. So let's get started. That photo actually wasn't supposed to be the photo on the page, but we were having a good laugh, and it wasn't just about my wonderful, you know, front end. But anyway, that's how it was. Look, this is a photo that was taken after we won our Section 10 for unreasonable. Our judge, Stuart, was amazing. He had set aside some time to actually go through it and thoroughly go through, you know, the information that was put forward to them. I'm not really great at this, but look, I'm just going to fly through this stuff. So, yeah, if I talk too much, which I do, because I'm like, let me know. So can we skip that? Oh, I should have mentioned who those people were. Can we go back? Over here I've got my big sister Esther. We've got Russell, who lives over in the Sydney area, and he's another activist. So these two people have been on doing this for a long time. So I learned a lot from my Doro meaning big sister. This is my youngest son Mark, and obviously that beautiful person in the front with a really great chest. That's me. And this is my daughter-in-law Skylar. And Skylar's from the Gunditjmara people in Western Australia, who also has land that we still fight for in terms of, you know, mining and so forth. Yes, thank you, sir. Oh, here we go. So I'll just fly through this stuff. I'm just going to tell you what happened. So up at the top here, this is our first march. So we've got a lot of our community mob out. My elders were on my mama's side, Nibari mob, and I get my family members. And look, I guess when I first heard about what was going on the Burrup, and if anyone doesn't know, the Burrup Peninsula has just been awarded or announced the subscription for UNESCO World Heritage nomination last month. Amazing place. If anyone wants to get some warm weather on them, son, please come and visit us. But look, this is our first chance. Over here we've got my uncle, Patrick Chernside, and my dear mum, who is my mum's younger sister, Josie Alex. She's also a co-founder of Save Our Songlines. She's been sort of helping me and supporting me in the background, obviously with the AIC, and obviously look at those spunky chicks sitting on the rock there, pointing up at the heavens. But look, can we go through that one? Thank you. This is a really important time for myself. So obviously I've never sort of been in this world of what everyone's sort of involved in now, and It's amazing how much your voice can be exposed in a way where it just enhances whatever you're wanting to say. So I've been fighting this fight with my mum and my family in the background for 20 years over land, history, culture, our significant sacred places. Murujuga has over 2 million petroglyphs. They don't like to tell you the truth how much are really there. They say 1 million, but it's over 2 million. A lot of the industry that's on this place right now have wiped out many, many, many thousands of them. It's really, really disgraceful actually, our industry and government, how they work hand in hand. And if you haven't been to Western Australia, it's a captive state. Being an Aboriginal person over there, well, for me, my father is white and my mother is black. So I got the best of both worlds, right? So we went out there to the United Nations. Look, when this came out, I really didn't know what I was doing, and I still don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just going with the flow and going through what it is my heart allows me and tells me to do. So both myself, Mum Josie, and we went over to the United Nations. I think it was a scary moment because we just rocked up with, some documents and paperwork with a speech on it. We walked up there and I had this shirt on and we were sort of standing there in line and like, okay, this is cool, we're here, let's do this. I see some mob from the Sydney that are there because I see this big Aboriginal flag. And I'm like, oh my God, country mob. So we're kind of standing there waiting to catch up with them. But I'm so glad they were there because when we walked in, I was like amazed at this place. This is like phenomenal for me. And I'm sort of going, okay, let's go standing up thinking, we're going to go and have a yarn here. But there's actually a big process. So thank goodness they were there to help us in understanding how to do this. Because just a couple of arrows from the bush coming in and just saying, here, this is what we want to talk about. So it was amazing and the whole process of it was great. There are a lot of do's and a lot of don'ts. However, there are a lot of, all I've heard, and I feel this way, the United Nations, there's a lot about recommendations. I probably almost got put in a naughty corner when I did bring that out at an event. And I did say it to them, and of course, we're not allowed to speak our mind apparently here in Australia, but I did say, look, all I've heard in the 4 days of this event is recommendations, recommendations, recommendations. How about some action? That's all I wanted to know. And then I came to another event, it's the same thing. And like we've been sitting here going, we're going over, it's almost like a cut and paste these days for us. We've got to cut and paste everything that we did 20 years ago because we're still talking about it now. Right? So this is our first march. It's been a big march out in the borough. Some pretty, awesome looking people. We've also got this young man here. He's my media guy and gets my voice out there for everybody. Just an amazing person. These are my young mothers, the Daniel sisters, which are an area on the Barrett right now has been destroyed with the Perdaman project, but I'll get back to that. We've got all family members, people who are really concerned, people who are wanting to do the fight. Like this was a massive thing. I flew all the way from Geneva, landed in Karratha, jumped in a car and then flew straight out there and did the march. And it was amazing. I was like exhausted by then and I collapsed I think after that and just sort of wanted to sleep. Over here at the top we've got Disrupt Borough Pub. Now we've got a couple of these individuals in the room here. One right behind. The lockdown lady. Stand up, Disrupt Borough Pub. And look, this to me is crazy, honestly, but it was effective and amazing. Courageous. Crazy, yes, but damn courageous. Your heart and soul is put into something like this, and these mother, they get their shit together really well, put it that way. And it's a really scary sort of prospect in the terms of where you're fighting for something so real, and then policing, government officials, so forth, they just hammer you like you've done something really wrong. They don't hammer. What you're doing is really wrong is not allowing us to speak the truth. And this is what's happening here. So we've been through a bit with the Disrupt Borough Pub, our allies over in the west. and they're phenomenal. And other NGOs and agencies and collaborative groups that fight for the same fight. Over in the West, they hammer us as they do here and all around, yeah? But look, next page. And thank you. My sister love. Okay, this is what I'm fighting against. What I, my family, my team. So this is a short little clip of what's happening out there, what has happened and what continues to happen. So this is the borough. It's 4,964 hectares. Hope that's the right number because my son will be choked up about that. But here we go. Woodside, Pluto. This place is just phenomenal. It's phenomenal. And when people come to see it, especially those government officials who avoid it, and they see it, they're almost driving along with blinkers like this because they don't want to look around and go, this is what you did. Over here, this is not destroying our air. No way, look at that. This is what we get told. It's not destroying our rock art. It's not destroying anything, really. If you were to stand up on a day like this with no rain in the borough, you go to put into Google, all right, what's the weather like? It will tell you it's raining. It will tell you it's pouring, right? And it's clear as day, not one cloud in the sky. It's because of the acidic rain. So this is not real. This is what government industry like to tell you. It speaks for itself, right? Over here we've got Yarra, another fertiliser plant, and right where all this is, they've got Nyangale Gorge, right, which is an area where tourists, anyone who wants to know about the petroglyphs, our rock art, our history, we're overlooking at this. So any tourists that come over to Western Australia, come to Burrup Peninsula, you want to go and see the Burrup, the beauty, the nature. But this is what you're looking at. This right here is what I have tried with my team and family, been trying to avoid, the Section 10. We're going to put the Section 10 in. We did try for the Section 9 in 2022, February of 2022. They got knocked back by then Susan Lake and then obviously Minister of Environment, Water and Environment, Tanya Pilberstick. She knocked that back. She actually came to visit me for an hour, or a couple of hours. Yeah, I did tell her that, the next time she comes, she doesn't make the wrong, doesn't make a good decision, then there's going to be more than words. I don't like that. And that's coming from a Maori woman. So after we put the Section 10 in with some brilliant-minded people, I call him, he is brains on legs, put it that way. That's his nickname from me. And name professor, I can't say his name, but that's what I call it. Amazing, unbelievably brilliant people and team that have been behind me when all this was happening. And it was just a challenge, like every time we put a submission in, they would throw something back, it was just full on. And I'm learning as I go along in this space, so it was just full on. In saying that, we did it under the Section 10 to 800 plus people, individuals, everyone that was concerned. That was mind-blowing because they'd never had that in Australian history, where someone had gone in and put so much submissions into protecting one's place. So for all those individuals who had cared so much and who do have, us backing behind us, thank you so very much, because without that, this could have gone a hell of a wrong way as it is now, but worse. We have to fight for what it is that we feel in our hearts, right? This is what I do. So this is basically the Burrup, the World UNESCO Heritage listed place. So if everyone's had a good look at that, can we change the next one? This is Spunky Grable. Again, my youngest son, who's been behind me, has taken a lot for himself to come out as a young man, a breeding, been through the law, and we practice our culture, and we're really serious about it over on that side of the country. It's one thing I know, when colonisation comes through this area, we notice it. As Murujuga people from the other side, we notice it, and it's really really sad to see are really strong-minded people and people who fight the fight. And that's something so important to our culture and who we are as and our identities that get stolen and taken. You know, and when we come over here, like when Sister Girl got up and talked about her families, these beautiful women, look, this is true. And we've seen it all the time, and like I've been over to Brisbane last, Sydney, and you guys got hit really badly. But the one thing you've got, other than that, the academics. So that just fucked them right up. That's what you guys hold. And that's the strength that you guys have in terms of, you know, beating them at their own game when it comes to educating yourself in the way we do. So keep up the good work, all of us. Amazing. My mum's younger sister, my Pat, and obviously my girl. This here was taken when we beat Woodside and not SEMA. My kids know all about it. Next, please. Now, this is not long ago. My family and I flew over to France. In Paris for the UNESCO World Heritage nomination. It was really intense, to say the least. Obviously, our Minister Murray Watts was over there lobbying all the other nations to, you know, basically have no protections over this amazing place. This here, obviously, at the UNESCO, this is our stories. These here are 70 to 100,000-year-old rock art. Our ancestors are old people in there. We've got the depiction of the first human face is carved into this rock. And this is important because this tells the story of our old people and who were here. This is evidence. This is not just bullshit. This is who we are. This is who our country mob are. Our songlines come from one end of the country to the other. It just bounces back and forth and beyond. This is important. It is the way we are as people, and we carry this with importance because we are connected to the stars and to the mora, to the water. We are connected to everything, and not just us. There's certain individuals or certain families that hold those special connections and footprints. I hold a footprint on behalf of my family for this place. That is why I fight so hard. Really scary stuff happened to me in the past. I won't go into that, but truly it was an eye-opener and it changed my world, like literally. And I fight so hard for this because it's what my old people wanted. It's what they left behind for us so that we can continue our generational stories. This is why I'm here. This is why I do this with my family. And this is what we do for our grandkids. Because this is storytelling. What they saw is what they carved. Pretty much so it's a photo of hard work. But this is our beautiful Murujuga. Next slide, please. Now this is what they didn't show in UNESCO. The truth. They showed these photos up on the UNESCO walls, on the UNESCO, projectors, but they were not showing them the real photos. This is, in the 3.5 years that the government has sat on, my Section 10, it went from this is now, it's already happened. The Section 10 was supposed to be there to protect those certain significant sacred places, the whole of the borough. And yet, it's all gone. This here, fighting enough, I have to go over this, otherwise I'll cry. It's the only area in this whole construction plan, footprint of this brand new Perdaman fertiliser plant that the government had spent billions supporting, not making roads, hospitals, mental health, homelessness. Don't worry about all that. Let's just get this up. So they've hammered this project in 3.5 years. It's not going to be long before the green lights are on, but I ain't going to let that happen without a fight. Put it that way. But this is the only place that they have put fencing around it, and it's got on the Aboriginal side. So that's the reality of my world. So the whole place has just been UNESCO listed. Murray Watts went to Paris. He lobbied Kenya. Kenya then lobbied all of their mob, and guess what? I did a bit of Googling myself, rang up my legal because all our stuff couldn't, I don't know, the computers and everything failed. Rang her up and said, can you Google something for me? I said, I want you to Google Kenya. They Googled Kenya. And I said, now I want you to find something there. She goes, well, where is it? I don't know. So I said, I want you to go to Kenya and tell me what you find. Put in Woodside. In that search she did, she's like, oh my God, Ray. I'm like, what? Tell me. Kenya, it says Woodside tourism. And I'm like, oh, Woodside doing tourism now. Okay. But that's what was it. So all of the countries, all right, they had lobbied and signed under to change, those certain, protections. They had watered down. Murray Watts lobbied not to protect the rock art and go and fight for the UNESCO World Heritage, but they went there to lobby to water down the protections on this place. That's what it is. True young. It's truth telling. Right? And all of these other countries that lobbied with them and signed up with them, they're all affiliated with Woodside. So there you go. Speaks for itself. Next slide, thanks. And we just came back from the Section 10. My family and I thought, well, you know what? Because I'm really stressing out now. There's really not much to protect in terms of what we wanted to protect out there. My family and I, we spoke to some legal team. It's like we've got to get an answer of this Section 10. 3.5 years, and everything's just getting, it's done. Irreversible, irreplaceable damage. Right? And my family again, we came out with federal course. Like I said, I was showing the words, not anything else. Next slide, thank you. This is the day we're out in the borough, and obviously the place I needed to be with my family is where it started. Oh, sorry. This day was a day of, I guess, hope, faith, praying up to the old people, sending it out to the universe. It's the right thing to do, hoping and praying that this Section 10 and what we went to court for, we won in the federal court. The judge ruled unreasonable, oversight, neglect and harm. Main 4 things that he used, because that's exactly what happened. It was before the fact and after the fact, but yet now we're talking after it's all happened. Alright, next slide, thank you. And yeah, we weren't happy. I can't even say the damn word with this because I spoke to my legal team this morning and you said something, I'm like, damn, I can't say it. So there was something I was going to talk about, but I'm not going to because I've been told not to. But look, in saying that, this particular day was the shittest day going, and realistically, I don't know why I thought it was going to go great. My team arrived from Sydney all the way to Karratha. We're out in the borough in Hearson's Cove, which is a place where we all go swimming, the whole community. Amazing place. Look, in saying that, I had the ASFA team come. So the government officials who've been sitting on my Section 10, literally on my Section 10, keeping it warm or hatching it, I don't know what the hell they were doing. Well, they weren't doing anything what they were supposed to do. In saying that, they're here, we rock up, I pull up, my whole team is there. My team had travelled from the east, come there. As soon as they rocked up, the minute we got there, half an hour we were in there working. Getting things ready to give them a good show. To come and take these visitors, all right, give them a tour, tell them our story, and then show them the specific, the particular sites that were directly involved in the Section 10. Anyway, I pulled up in my rig, really happy, right? It's going to go great, really psyching myself up for what, really? Anyway, I pulled up, my lawyer comes bounding over, but it's not a joyous bounding. It's like okay, an intentional bound. And she said, oh, look, I just wanted to let you know. They said they're going to give you an hour and a half. I went, oh, okay, jumped out of the car, and obviously, you can see I'm not fucking happy. Right? I'm actually stewing, and I'm telling you now, the black came out of me that day. I was fucking fuming. I was so hurt, so upset, the fact that, how dare you have me and my team come over here, you sit there and you deliberately disrespect the memory of my mother, the memory of my family, the memory of my everything, our old people who left this for us. And you're telling me you're going to spend an hour and a half with me? Oh, fuck no. Angry wasn't a word. Like I had to remove myself from this place. And being a Māori woman, been through a Mindali law, I tell you what, I wanted to paint myself up and come back to see these women. I was so angry. I was so hurt. You know, the physical pain inside me was enormous. And it was like, we're coming to the pivotal crunch right now. And you've got the cheek and audacity. You've travelled 7 hours to spend an hour with me. Oh, sorry, an hour and a half. When I got back home after losing my shit, of course, I was so upset about this. You know, who the hell do these people think they are? You know, and you're on my turf right now. I need to remove myself from you. Right? At the end of the day, this is me losing my shit. Telling them so, and then one of the individuals who, the ASPA team says, but we're here to meet, we've got other people to meet. Oh, fuck! The other people, Woodside, Murujuga, Perth, for 3.5 years you've been meeting with them, but you've only met with me right now for the 3 minutes we're standing here while I'm busting my shit at you. That was it. But then I get home, they told me I only actually had an hour. I'm so glad I wasn't there because things could have just went really, really badly for me and them more than anything. How fucking dare they? Excuse me, true. I'm really bad at that. But look, that's what happened. So when we talk about unreasonable efforts, I believe this is demonstrating how unreasonable they are. Who the hell do they think they are? You know what? This is not the end. There's more to come. Alright? Keep tuning. Because that ain't stopping here.
Brilliant. Well, our last speaker, before we have hopefully some time for question and discussion, is from a sister from Aotearoa. This is Dr. Arama Rata from Taranaki. And actually, I'll get Dr. Arama to read out her tribal names and tribal connections. She's a Maori researcher, writer and organiser whose work centres on Indigenous solidarities and internationalism, anti-colonial methodologies and liberatory pedagogies. She currently leads research projects with Working to End Racial Oppression, Tutama Wahine, a Maori community empowerment organisation, and Riri Research to Interrupt Racism and Inequities. Her advocacy spans roles as co-founder of Kohine Tanaki, a protest safety and community care group, co-founder of Tiwan Kakara, a Taranaki Maori Research Network, and steering group member of progressive foreign policy group Te Kauaki. So it's actually really welcome to have a sister from Aotearoa and also another sister as well. Thank you.
Tēnā tātou, nei rā kumihi ki te mana whenua o enei whenua, ara ko te iwi o Wurundjeri, Wurrung, ki ngā iwi takitaki katoa o te whenua moe moe a. He uru tēnei no Taranaki Maunga, ko Taranaki, ko Ngāru Hine, ko Ngāti Mani Poto Ngā Iwi. Kia ora everybody, I'd like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri, Wurrung and all First Nations here today, and acknowledge our long histories of resistance and solidarities that have really inspired Māori protest movements back home. I'd like to also give my thanks to the organisers of this wonderful conference, including Fred, who's taken great care of us, and Sue here hosting our panel today. On the program, I mistakenly thought it was the Ballinballum Palace that the conference was taking place at, but I'm just going to roll with that in my mind. But it's really lovely to be here. And of course, it's such an honour to be on this wonderful panel with our tuakana, our sisters here, who have spoken so powerfully against colonialism that's been endured. And of course, as Indigenous peoples, we all have our own very distinct experiences, very different experiences. But one thing that we have in common, of course, is our confrontation with white patriarchal sovereignty. And in reflecting of that, of course, I think of our siblings in Palestine at the moment, facing extreme genocidal violence. And of course, white patriarchal sovereignty stands in complete contradiction to Indigenous sovereignty, which derives ontologically from the dialectical unity of Indigenous people and our planet. We relate to the earth as mother and each other as kin, which I think resonates with the conference that we hear today with this notion of ecosocialism. So we're confronted with white sovereignty, which, as Eileen Morton Robinson so precisely lays bare, is premised on white possession, on the domination of peoples othered as non-white, and the domination of the planet too. This, of course, is a confrontation with racial capitalism. White hegemony and white identity was forged here in violence against Indigenous peoples. Ethnically diverse European peoples arrived on these lands and in our lands in Aotearoa, and it was through their joint project of genocidal violence that they forged their common identity and became white. In both countries, we also had white immigration systems that worked to reproduce white hegemony. This forms what Cedric Robinson calls a racial regime, a racial hierarchy. And this is obviously a fiction, right? We're not distinctly different and racialized, and we do not exist in a racial hierarchy. And so because it is a lie, it requires constant maintenance, which an author from here, researcher Ghassan Hajj, exposes so well also. So there's always times when these racial regimes come into question, their legitimacy is challenged, and when capitalism comes into crisis, where we see the re-entrenchment of the unequal power relations, and this is usually played out through extreme colonial violence and environmental destruction. The racial regimes were challenged up when it came up against the global movement for decolonisation. And this was a particular problem for settler colonies because they are founded and exist only through that constant genocidal violence, constant erasure, constant dispossession of Indigenous peoples for their very existence. Here in Australia, so-called Australia, this colonial project was they tried to kind of rebrand this as a multicultural project. You didn't even try very hard, I don't think, here, and it didn't last very long. In Aotearoa, New Zealand, the way that they tried to rebrand the colonial project was through the notion of treaty exceptionalism. We're different because we have a treaty. We have the best race relations in the world. These types of myths are quite commonly heard in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And while many people look on at the treaty as something very positive, it really was brought from the dustbin of history and resurrected to rebrand the country in many ways. And so it went from complete obscurity to the government starting to celebrate Waitangi Day as this kind of day of unity and of national independence, I suppose. And so through this process, we've seen like treaty jurisprudence used to give symbolic rights and recognition to Māori without any substantive forms of decolonisation. Within these movements for Māori sovereignty that led to having a Waitangi tribunal where treaty justice is scrutinised, This came about through political protest movements in the late 1960s and 70s, where there was a real class consciousness that was core to it. But since the establishment of these settlement processes, there's been what we've called like a cultural turn, where indigeneity is kind of held up, and Indigenous rights as a framework that's kind of thought about separately from class-conscious discussions. And so it's the tractions that have been made through this Waitangi process, through establishing tribal bodies that are recognised by the Crown and where limited forms of reparations are given, this has kind of led to more class division within Māori society, and hasn't really led to any kind of substantive changes. And what we've seen through the gains that we have made is that they're very easily unravelled. So at the moment, racial capitalism is in crisis around the world. As the speaker yesterday who opened us revealed, the rules-based international order established after World War II has collapsed. International law has been exposed and has failed. It has lost legitimacy. And we see the fascism around the world seeking to re-entrench unequal power, through genocidal violence against externalised threats, but also through the scapegoating of Indigenous and migrant communities within settler states. In Aotearoa, we've seen a far-right coalition government come to power who are attacking Māori rights left, right and centre. We're seeing increasing support for US imperialism through Five Eyes, through the establishment recently of an FBI office in Wellington, and the ramping up of militarism in the region. And we see that here as well, of course, through pacts like AUKUS. We arrived a little early, my partner and I, and paid a visit to Camp Sovereignty, where, of course, obviously following the attack that took place there, where we saw white settler violence, reenacting the genocidal violence that occurred there as a site where a massacre had taken place. And while the attack was very explicitly against Indigenous people, the resulting hospitalisations were mostly of women of colour. There's such a profound absurdity to this so-called logic where an anti-immigration march attacks peoples who have always been here. And I think that obviously speaks to what we all know, and that it was not so much solely an anti-immigration march, but a white supremacist march. Yep. And I think it's also important in this moment to look at where this march arose from and the preceding events. We know that this march was in response to the Palestine solidarity marches, and we see across the Anglosphere at least, and probably the collective West, that the Zionist far-right lobby is really trying to exacerbate racial tensions through the idea of white nationalism, and that Zionism is a threat to Indigenous peoples everywhere. Sadly, in the country that we live in Aotearoa, the Christian right plays a very large role in that, and we actually have an Indigenous Zionist Christo-fascist formation called the Destiny Church, which actually has events here in so-called Australia sometimes as well. We also have a group called the Indigenous Coalition for Israel, and what unites them is Christian Zionism, not actually indigeneity, so we need to be really clear about that. They in fact are opposed to Māori sovereignty because their project is a Christian nationalist project, which is in stark contradiction to any notion of Māori sovereignty. But they pose a real challenge, and their message is spread across the world to people who see that as providing some form of legitimacy to claims of indigeneity by global Jewry, which really is a kind of racialised mischaracterisation of what indigeneity actually means. And it totally, of course what's at stake there is claims to indigeneity. What's at stake there is the idea of settler colonialism as a frame that we can analyse what's happening in Palestine. So by trying to say that global Jewry is Indigenous, they seek to shift our focus from what is Zionism as a settler colonial project. So our session today is on fighting back. How do we do that? In our country, the left kind of looks on at Indigenous movements with kind of awe and envy, I would say. They see the revolutionary potential within our movements, and they think that's great, but they're kind of at a loss as to their place within the movement, I would say. Some seek to harness it, just to harness the revolutionary potential of Māori sovereignty movement, or to try and steer it towards a solely class-based analysis without putting forward a decolonial analysis of their own. And for our part, Māori, sometimes we hear the line repeated that, it's not the left wing or the right wing, they're two parts of the same capitalist bird, and that's like a totally fair, understandable statement to make when you have no experience of actually seeing what a leftist party would actually look like. And a truly leftist movement, of course, would be completely in line with Indigenous liberation. We also hear repeated the idea that Marxism is a white man's theory, without necessarily looking at who is using this revolutionary theory to free themselves from the yoke of colonialism and imperialism and racial capitalism. And some of our people, like all peoples, align themselves with elites who they mistakenly think will serve their interests just because they look like them, when in fact they're serving the interests of the Crown to restabilise the colony. As scholars like Walter Rodney have taught us, and what many Māori freedom fighters have always known, any analysis that looks at race without class or class without race is a dead end. And any colonial, as is any decolonial movement, that it isn't also anti-imperial. So the necessity of anti-colonial, anti-imperial struggle has definitely been brought into sharp focus for us due to Israel's genocidal violence in Gaza, supported by the collective West, including the US's lieutenants here in the Pacific, New Zealand and Australia. Any misconception that New Zealand or Australia are democracies have been shattered over the past 2 years, I think, as we've taken to the streets. We've been part of mass mobilisations that have been completely ignored by our elected leaders. And what we often get told is like, we can't upset the US. For our own part, in Tāmaki Makaurau, Auckland, since the onset of Israel's genocidal violence in Palestine in October 2023, we came together as experienced activists from the Māori sovereignty movement, from the environmental movement, from queer and trans rights movements, and Palestine, and some nerds like me, came together to support Palestinian liberation, and we did that by forming a group called Kaiawhina, which is a group dedicated to community care, providing marshalling and guidance to newer organisers. And for the past 2 years, we've provided a protest safety presence at over 200 protests, not only for Palestine, but also for Māori liberation, also for unions, also for pride events, including an event where a drag artist was giving a science demonstration at a community library that was stormed by Destiny Church people, and frontline defenders were attacked and violently and sexually assaulted before the police arrived. And like the community at Camp Sovereignty, this will be a trauma that they have to, that we are required to support them through, I believe, over many years. So our organising with Kaiawhina has been intersectional, and by that I don't mean that we merely operate along the lines of the logic of inclusion, but that we understand the unity of the field. We understand that we're in collective struggle. Interestingly, when the Hikoi Motitiriti, the massive Māori mobilisation that happened at the end of last year, arrived in Auckland, our Kaiawhina team were there. There was over 100 of us to marshal over tens of thousands of protests across a 5-kilometre long path over the Auckland Harbour Bridge. But we were met with a challenge from some of the Māori organisers who'd come down from the north, where that movement had begun. Because they didn't understand who these people were that were marshalling Māori across the bridge. They weren't all Māori people. So that is presumably where the challenge came from. And we had to make it very clear that these volunteers that were part of our Kaiawhina team were from multiple communities across Auckland, working under Māori leadership to protect our treaty. And we were very intentional in this approach because we understand that our fight for treaty justice is not about fighting for a nation where non-Māori people are not present. It's rather about fighting for a nation that respects and upholds Māori leadership and Māori sovereignty. So in continuing our work, we've been inspired by the Anti-Genocide March for Humanity across the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and also the Victoria Bridge in Brisbane, where First Nations and Palestinians stood shoulder to shoulder. And I'm pleased to share with everyone today that we're actually organising 1 week from today a march led by tangata whenua Māori and Palestinian organisers across our Auckland Harbour Bridge to demand the New Zealand government sanctions Israel. And once again, I'd just like to thank the organisers of the conference, this Ecosocialism conference, and looking at the theme of the conference, like I understand the historical relevance of the conference, of the conference's theme, and I appreciate the call that the organisers are making here to fight against rising violent and fascist forces. But as an Indigenous person, it's very hard to fully embrace the conference theme, as it raises the question, obviously, of who are these barbarians that practice this barbarism. So words like barbarian and savage fall on Indigenous ears as slurs, and they've been for so long weaponised against us to deny our humanity and to justify genocidal violence, dispossession and erasure. And so what we would like to see in Aotearoa is not only a movement for eco-socialism, but a movement for Indigenous-led anti-colonial eco-socialism. And so what would it mean to organise along these lines? I would argue that it requires dismantling white supremacy. It means giving up any investment we have in white sovereignty and white possession and white identity. To quote James Baldwin, as long as you think you're white, there's no hope for you. And I would add that, and this may be challenging, but I would add that the attack on camp sovereignty, reenacting the genocide of First Nations by white supremacists, was, in a sense, the most Australian thing I've ever seen. And as long as you think you're Australian, there's no hope for you. So as our other panellists mentioned, there's a need for us to deal with histories in Aotearoa and here in so-called Australia. There's a need for a new political project that incorporates land back and reparations as core to seizing the means of production and redistributing wealth. And there's a need for new identities to be forged as well. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Thanks heaps, Arama. That's really added a lot to the discussion. So we've had 4 wonderful fighters speaking just now, and this has been fantastic. So we do have a little bit of time, not a lot of time, because I think we'll need to leave a little bit of a gap between the 2 sessions, maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes. So we've probably got about 15 minutes for discussion and some very short responses by the speakers. Yeah, we'll take a few, I'll take maybe a round of 3. We might only have time for that, and the contributions will need to be no longer than 3 minutes. Someone here, I'm not sure who's got the contact sheet to pass around, to stay in touch with Socialist Alliance and Green Left Weekly and indicate if you'd like to be involved or just stay in contact. I do want to just read out what the next session of workshops is going to be before we start into discussion. At 11:30 there'll be a workshop in room 401, which is on Prabowo's Indonesia and the struggle for West Papuan self-determination. In workshop 2, in room 402, there'll be one on organising workers in today's economy. Workshop 3 will be in room 404 for Justice and Peace in South Asia, a dialogue between Pakistani and Indian socialists. Workshop 4 in room 405, as radical as reality, the role of art and media in a changing society. And finally, for anyone who's bought a ticket just for 1 or 2 sessions for the conference, people can upgrade those at the registration desk for more days. And then maybe the last thing I'd like to mention is that in Melbourne, and I'm sure in other cities, in Melbourne there will be a response to the racists, the white supremacists, the Nazis on Saturday next week, when there's going to be a repeat of white supremacist rallies all over the country. There will be sovereignty is never ceded. Rallies around the country, I'm sure. In Melbourne, the details are 11 a.m. at Flinders Street Station on the intersection. And they'll take up the whole questions of racism, the Nazis, solidarity with camp sovereignty, and also migrants are welcome, racists are not. So that will be publicised by Green Left Weekly and Socialist Alliance. So now I'd like to just take maybe 3 questions or comments, and there is one that's relevant for people in Victoria, which would be good to also maybe pass on to Lidia and Celeste. I've got you here, and I would actually, before you go, I might just throw in one myself. I know that's a bit unusual, but just given that we've got a treaty process going on in Victoria, it would be great to get some thoughts from Lidia and Celeste, because of course there's treaties and treaties. I'd just be interested to know your views about the treaty process in Victoria, because we could get a really shit treaty or a really good treaty, but doesn't seem to be much discussion happening at the grassroots. But there might be a lot more than I'm aware of. So it would be great to get just a little bit of a view from Celeste and Lidia about that. But before you answer, we'll just take 3 questions, and then over here. And anyone else want to ask a question or Farada? Oh yeah, we'd like people to come up to the microphone, because the roving mics aren't very good. They're a bit distorted. So yeah, if you could come up to the microphone, thanks.
Thank you very much. I've come up down from Sydney. I was invited here by Rachel, the fabulous, amazing Rachel. And what I want to say is I've never been to anything like this. It's not particularly of my interest, but I'm fighting a fight as well, because my son got shot 2 years ago in his own home with a mental health episode, and now I'm fighting to put mental health on 000, fighting police brutality, and on and on and on. And it's very hard. And often I think, in fact this week I thought, what the fuck am I doing? Where am I going? Where is it going? And thank you so much, because without your inspirational work, and I came to hear Senator Thorpe, but I haven't heard much, but I'm looking at her and she's gorgeous. So thank you all for doing this sort of thing, and we're all fighting our own fights, and we mustn't ever give up. I'm actually a refugee from Eastern Europe, and I'm always mindful of why I am here and why I'm allowed to be here. And that's why we all need to fight. So thank you again, because this is what makes people keep going. Thank you.
If Farada could come up, and you'll be the last, or maybe just one more, and then that'll be it. So Farada, and then you here? Yeah, and then we'll get responses from the speakers.
Oh, hi. So I've been organising lately in the long COVID community and around the COVID pandemic, and in amongst the activist networks that have been organising around COVID, well, first of all, we're thinking deeply about healthcare, but as part of that, of course, we have to think about Aboriginal healthcare and the dire, very grim situation with Aboriginal health. And also, we're trying to educate ourselves too about the colonial history of how infectious diseases have played a big role in genocide on this continent ever since the arrival of the first fleet. And I guess my question is, what can we, the activists who are organising around the COVID pandemic, what can we do in solidarity to further the situation with Aboriginal health?
Thanks. Good question. So I'll throw it over to the speakers. Regardless of whether you've been asked a question directly or not, you might have some extra things you want to make a comment on, or you might want to respond to the questions. So it can go in any order we like. Who would like to start first? Or do we just go down the... and we'll need people... There's the desk mic on the stand. Oh, the desk mic. That's working, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, it'd be great to hear from everyone because everyone had such inspiring talks in the beginning. So, yeah. Anyone like to start first? Yeah.
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, no, I mean, I've got a lot of thoughts. I've always got a lot of thoughts. But the one thing that it did occur to me the minute I sat down was that I hadn't actually talked very much about where to next. And as a union organiser for 5,000 years or whatever it's been now, you know, and going through what we went through also as a social justice person at that friggin' Nazi rally last Sunday. The one thing I'll say is that we've got to start reinforcing our own power as peoples. In the union movement, I'd say that the movement is almost dead at this point in the time, dead in the water. And all I ever hear, or not all I ever hear, but you know, the common refrain around unions is it'll be one person saying, the one time that I needed the union to do something and they didn't. People have forgotten that the union is them. You know, it's about building collective power. It's about an injury to one is an injury to all. And that's a sentiment that goes across all of the movements, like an injury to, you know, in the Indigenous and Palestinian solidarity space, an injury to Palestinians is an injury to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. This is how we join the movements. This is how we build movements. We've got to remember, we've got to remember the power in the collective and fight that. Like, too often, I think, in this point of history, there's always a call for some sort of legislative remedy, whether it's that petition to deport Thomas Sewell or whatever the hell else it is, or it's a call for sanctions. If we were all getting together tomorrow and building up fighting funds and providing the means for dock workers, say, to go out on mass strike and shut down imports in this country, we could potentially shut down a war, you know? Same with, as an Arrernte woman, you know, it was seeing the photos of the borough was just making me, what had happened there was making me so ill because Pine Gap is on Arrernte country. And, you know, to know that there's people flipping switches on that land, feeding the intel that are guiding the missiles that are flattening the hospitals over in Palestine, coming from Arrernte country, knowing that harm's coming is just shocking. But even then, you know, that horrible installation, military installations right next to a sacred site for men that I've taken friends out to go and have a look at. And when you go out there as an Arrernte person, you'll get a car from Pine Gap, come out and start surveilling you to see what you're doing out there. We've got to remember to build the power, to build the collective, to remind people that the power lies in the collective and not in calling for these legislative remedies, because people who are guided by power, which is the entire political system, are never going to provide proper representation for the people. We don't need sanctions. We could shut down stuff tomorrow.
Kia ora. I'll just pick up on one of the questions, is that the others don't pertain to me so much, but there was the question around working together and organising spaces with Indigenous people and people of colour and those types of relationships. And that's an interesting one coming from Aotearoa because of our treaty. So because of our treaty, there's like a real, instead of the multicultural logic, there's this bicultural logic that prevails, which is really othering for non-white people, non-Māori, non-white people. We might call them tauiwi settlers of colour. So it's quite an othering spaces sometimes, and many communities of colour in Aotearoa don't understand their place within that treaty relationship, because it's a treaty between the Crown and Māori leaders, but it's understood to be a treaty between Māori people and white people. And so yeah, there is this tendency when we talk about treaty justice for migrants of colour to be excluded from conversations, to be excluded from treaty education processes and these types of things. And so I think there's a real need for Māori, and I think Palestine is really clarifying this, but to understand colonialism not just as a local phenomenon, but as a global phenomenon that displaces people, that provides economic opportunities in certain places and not elsewhere, that forces people of colour into close proximity to fight for the scraps of a white racial regime, right? A white supremacist racial regime. And so, yeah, understanding some of those solidarities is really important, and understanding, I think, and educating migrant communities about their place within the treaty relationship is important. And of course, for our Pacific Island whānau, our relations across the Pacific, that relationship goes back beyond the treaty. So it's like not trying to conflate all peoples together within the treaty relationship when there are also other ways to relate. Yeah, I'll leave it there. Kia ora.
I'm sitting uncomfortable because I have a titanium cage from being assaulted last year outside the MCG, so I had my spine snapped in my neck. And, you know, I'm meant to be under AFP protection. I've been assaulted more times under AFP protection than ever in my whole entire life. So, excuse me for, I can't turn my neck properly, and I'm in pain, so I need a Panadol. And whilst we're talking about Aboriginal health and mental health, you know, genocide is so real in this country, and one part of genocide is to maintain the harm on our bodies and the harm on our mental health. It's, you know, it's known genocide tactic to keep us unwell. And in terms of disease, you know, they brought smallpox, but our people are still dying from preventable disease. And, you know, there's so many examples of medicines that aren't reaching our people, particularly on your country, sister, right now, that, you know, diseases that should have been eradicated, our people are still dying from, our children are still dying from, because they can't even access the medicines that can make them well. Aboriginal Health Services were set up as a preventative model and as a holistic model that kept our people well. They were our political voices in those days. Unfortunately, they've become corporatised and subjected to government funding and have to tick the boxes, and if they speak out, they don't get the money that they need, including our Aboriginal legal services. There's no prison health care, so our people again are dying at the hands of the system because they can't access diabetic medication. They're having fits. Our women are having babies chained to the bed, and, you know, there's no such thing as dental care. We've got our men, and one in particular who banged his head on the wall so bad from a toothache. It was the only way that he could get into the hospital. Police violence, well, you know, I've got the AFP texting me because I'm heading to Camp Sovereignty, and like, what am I meant to do? You know, what protection can I have from these Nazis who I'm under attack from every single day? got another death threat yesterday, and, you know, have to just rock up into my workplace knowing that someone wants to kill me again. Where do you go? You know, I've asked the Parliament to provide the funds to have my own black security, because that's who I do trust. Parliament won't do that. They're like, that's what the AFP are there for. And I'm like, well, you know, how do you know the AFP aren't connected to the far-right Nazis? And they said, well, Senator Thorpe, you know, we go through a process to look at all of our officers. And I said, well, do you strip them naked to ensure they don't have swastika, you know, Nazi symbols on their body? And they said, oh, we don't go that far. And I said, well, how can I be sure that I'm, you know, not in harm's way? And I promise you, every time I've meant to be protected by them, I get hurt. Even speaking at a Palestinian rally, I was attacked while the AFP was sitting there watching me, or supposedly watching me, but they were profiling Palestinian activists. And because I called the AFP officers, see you next Tuesdays, I had the now new police commissioner, AFP commissioner, say in my office, well, Senator, you know, can you just be careful what you say when you're at rallies about the police? And she just got promoted now to be the AFP commissioner. So the boot is on our neck, and I am just, I'm up there as an example of what is happening on the ground to our people every minute of every day. And, you know, I'll die fighting just like my old people up on that screen, and I don't have a problem with that. But this is just an example of what we're dealing with, and we need to organise, we need to, you know, go to every rally, but we also need to use you need to use the white privilege that you have and the connections that you have, so that truth-telling is part of everything that we do, and is part of this society that we've got to deal with, because they need to face the truth, because we're coming.
Damn straight.
And from one angry black woman to the next.
I guess if we're talking about truth-telling, geez, I've got to try and up these guys now here. But look, seriously, on that note, you know, Senator Thorpe, in the real worlds that we live in, I do have to agree in terms of, look, I haven't been, you know, an angel child, trust me. It's been, you know, as you do grow up, you're a bit of rough around the edges, still rough around the edges, if not rougher now. However, look, I totally agree. Look, since I've started this, like, I've had issues with police, and, you know, I used to be a big drinker, 10 years, 11 years sober. And I'm kind of glad, because I reckon those individuals that were on the beach that day, I tell you, they wouldn't have been standing. But in saying that, look, I've got... obviously living in a small community, everybody knows everybody, but yeah, look, I have faced that, you know, the challenge with our authorities, especially those the likes of Woodside, because look, we know in our state, Woodside are security for the police in our state of Western Australia are security for Woodside. I have witnessed this, I know this. Look, I've been charged for offences that I never even did. Won them all, got all these restraining orders put on me, and the word is like our Senator, Sister Love here, Senator Thorpe, you know, angry women. Well, damn straight we're angry. We're angry because no one's listening. And for women in general, look, society wouldn't be anything without us. And the way I see it from our old people, from the start, you know, when life on earth started, there was a balance. Men and women. Yeah? Men are up here, like think they are, but it's actually the women. The women who rule the household, the women who bring the children into our world. Right? It is us who make this work. You know, with our men at our side, not in front of us or behind us or vice versa. It's together as people, you know, respectfully. You know, and look, we're talking about the supremacists. My daughter came in, she's 21 years old. I've got, you know, 9 grandkids. Look, she came in that day and, you know, I don't do the Facebook thing. If I got something to say, I'll be knocking on someone's front door. But in saying that, she came in, she was busting her chops around about, you know, the events. I saw it briefly on TV and, you know, I know it sounds weird and unusual because I am quite strange, but look, I had a giggle about this because it was like, well, everyone's putting everything on Facebook and the comments that were being made and blah, blah, blah. And it's true, look, well, Bub, I didn't know what else to say to her because she was saying everything I wanted to say. But in saying that, I'm sitting there and I'm like, Bub, I just want to sit in the corner with my bag of popcorn and just watch it all unfold. At the end of the day, these people, men, who actually think they're powerful, you're out there with your faces covered, like, that's not one, powerful to me. 2, you're out there beating the shit out of women. I mean, how weak and gutless is that? Mind you, I'll give you a run for your money. All right, you think anyone's going to come and try and approach me and disrespect me, one, but to try and physically hurt me, damn straight, bring that shit over to Western Australia. Because we got some power there, and that's called law. Our law, L-O-R-E. Black full of law. Bring your shit, because we'll bring you down. Because at the end of the day, we do this from our wirad, our heart. Because this is who we are. And those secret, sacred, you know, places that we're fighting for, this is what makes us who we are, and this is what assists us in the way we are in fighting. And my mum, those people came over to Mangora, stood there and disrespected my mum straight out in the memory of her, and then straight. Like they say, no one would ever let anyone hurt their mother, right? So this is what they're doing to our ngora, our world. So that's what we fight for the survival of a human race, survival of everybody. And then these bloody idiots go out there, big tough blokes. Come on, bring it on, women.
Thanks, everybody. Especially thanks to all the speakers. It's really great that you've allocated this time.
I want to do a photo shoot with as many people and Lidia Thorpe as possible if we can.
If that's possible, as a especially solidarity with Camp Sovereignty that faced the attack the other day, but also, you know, it's to celebrate the power of the struggle against everything we're seeing, including these huge corporations. So, yeah, okay, so Rachel wants us all up the front, or who's doing the photography? We have to...
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Who's taking the photo?